Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here, Wednesday morning, May the 5th, and I'm happy to be here. I just barely made my show. I'm just getting the chat room open, and this is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes live. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and yeah, I'm just so glad to be able to do these shows and to, just keep on getting the word out regarding child abuse and, so glad to be able to share what I'm finding, as I research all the information that's out there online, and just to be able to share this with people. It's just awesome because, that's why I'm doing this show. Is there are many voices out there speaking about child abuse, and all the different kinds of child abuse and whatnot. And I just wanted to be one more voice, because the more, the merrier, the more people speaking about abuse, and getting this out in the public, mainstream society, I think the more we'll be able to make a difference, and I think that we'll be able to really make some change. And I think silence is the problem. Silence is the problem. It just allows abusers to go free to do what they do, to abuse children. And silence allows, sadly allows the survivor to stay in a pit of despair, which I did for many years. So that's why I'm doing this show. So I'm so happy to be here. And I was just chatting on Skype to a whole bunch of people, so I barely made my show. And so you might hear some little noises in the background. That's all these lovely, awesome friends of mine who are still chatting with me on Skype, and the little noise in the background that comes up with that little message that pops up. So, yeah, so many awesome people. I just thank you all so much for being here and being part of my life. And, the support is just awesome, and it means everything to me. It really does. To have you in my life. I mean, even like 7 months ago, back in October, when I just started reaching out, like last fall, and going public with my story and whatnot. And since then, I've really experienced a huge, enormous amount of healing, just by having the support that I've had, from so many awesome people and other advocates, and like in Australia and Canada, the U.S., the UK. I've got some awesome friends in the UK. So I just thank everybody. And so it's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates or therapy certificates. I'm not a therapist, counselor. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do this show, just to get some more information out there, and just to be some support for people who may have been through, who suffered through child abuse and are, now trying to work through their healing, and just to be one more voice, just to say you're not alone, and there is help and there's hope out there. I've met so many survivors myself who I just look to for inspiration myself, and I know that they did it, I can do it, you can do it, and it's just a matter of continually reaching out to get the best help you can wherever you can find it, whether it's getting a therapist or counselor, or if you don't want to do that and you're just not comfortable with that, there's online support groups for child abuse survivors, child abuse survivor groups, lots and lots of those out there, and they're just awesome because you get to talk to people who want the best for you and want you to heal and come along in your journey just like they're trying. And there's they generally have lots of information and resources to offer people, because they've been there and they've experienced it, and they're working through their healing too. So I just wanted to be one more person just to say, we can do this. We do deserve to have a good life, and we're not alone, and we shouldn't be suffering alone. And also, if you're a young person under the age of 18, I ask that you get permission to listen to this show. I cover all topics related to abuse, child abuse, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence issues, you name it. I'm talking about it on this show. There's a lot of adult content on here. So I think when young people are listening to this show, they should have someone listen to the show with them, just to make sure that it's something that you should be listening to. And, then if you have questions, you'll have someone there to help you find some answers. Abuse is a scary topic, and not very many people like to talk about it. There isn't a whole lot of people talking about it in mainstream. So, you want to make sure that you have permission to listen to this show, and you want to keep yourself safe, and make sure that you do get online and check out all the online safety tips for young people, and how to keep yourself safe, right? It's so important because there are literally millions and millions of child sexual predators trying to get a hold of young people. And if you don't believe me, just check out the FBI's website. They have some awesome information on there regarding how many people are actually trying to get a hold of children, child sexual predators. How many of them there are online at all times trying to get a hold of children. So you want to keep yourself safe, and you do want to make sure that someone knows what you're doing online, and keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, and let your friends know, keep themselves safe, right? You can save your life and you can save your friends' lives by doing these things, you know what I mean, by keeping yourself safe. And there's some really easy tips, and it's really easy to do, and all you have to do is get the education and get the information, right? So important. So we're going to get right into today's topic, which is common symptoms in adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And I found this article on healthyplace.com, www.healthyplace.com. And this is an article that was written like in 2008, so it's old, but it doesn't matter because the information is good. So it was last updated in December 2009. And it's written by a staff writer with this article here. But the information is the same, and it's good information. And it really talks about the physical symptoms of childhood sexual abuse, psychological and behavioral symptoms of childhood sexual abuse, after effects of child sexual abuse in adults. And it's not a very long article, but we're going to go through that today, because we finished off with what we were looking at yesterday from the Awareness Center, which was all the 21 different common coping mechanisms used by adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So we're going to continue on with this topic and just keep looking at it. So I'm going to read right from the top of the page here. And they just list off. They say physical, psychological, and behavioral symptoms experienced by adults sexually abused as children, and the impact child sexual abuse has on its adult victims. So that's what this is all about. And please listen at your own discretion. You know, you have to know what's good for you to listen to. So if the topic of abuse bothers you, or the topic of child sexual abuse bothers you, you need to turn the show off and listen at your own discretion, please, because you ultimately are responsible for what you listen to. So if you think, this topic's going to bother me, then you have to turn it off. You have to do the right thing for yourself and know what you can listen to, and be prepared to know what you can listen to and handle. You know, we're all in different places in our healing, and it's very important that you don't move too fast in your healing. And so if this is a topic that you think is just really going to bother you, then you need to turn the show off and listen at your own discretion, please. Because we want to keep ourselves safe, and I know, if I was listening to something and the topic was really bothering me, I would just turn the show off. And you won't be hurting my feelings at all, because I know we're all in different places in our healing. I've done a lot of research and a lot of study on healing from survivors of child abuse. And we are all in different stages and different places in our healing. And so we have to be comfortable and know where we're at. If we're not that far along in our healing, sometimes it's just not a good idea to be listening to adult survivor issues and things like that, because it can trigger you, and then you'll be miserable, and you'll have to, you really should have someone listening to this with you if you are just beginning your healing journey. And also, if you're on your own, then you might want to turn it off and just listen at another time. You can always come back and catch the archives, because you know what, or you don't even have to listen at all. It's just not going to hurt my feelings at all. We have to be safe and know where we're at, so make sure that you do know that whether this topic will bother you or not. This is all about child sexual abuse, and I'm a survivor of child sexual molestation, so I know all about it. So the thing is I'm okay talking about it and listening to it, but some people aren't, and so you need to make that decision for yourself and listen at your own discretion. So we're going to get right into this. It's called, this is the list of the physical symptoms of childhood sexual abuse. There's chronic pelvic pain. This is what adult survivors might experience, right? Not all of these. We might not experience every single one of these, but these are just some of the physical symptoms that a person who has survived childhood sexual abuse might be feeling or going through the physical symptoms, because they've done so many studies on it, and they know just by all the studies that they've done that this is pretty standard. It's unfortunate and it's very sad, because no child should have to suffer any abuse, period. It doesn't matter whether it's emotional, verbal, psychological, physical, or sexual. Child abuse is wrong. It's against the law, and so it's unfortunate so many children, 1 in 3 and 1 in 6. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused in some way before the age of 18. So there's a lot of us out there. And sad to say, but 1 in 3 and 1 in 6. I mean, that's too many. So that's why, they know. They've done so many studies. Excuse me, I'm just waking up. My voice is terrible this morning. They know they've done the studies. They know what the symptoms are, right? So chronic pelvic pain, gastrointestinal symptoms, distress, muscular skeletal complaints. There's issues with obesity and eating disorders, right? Insomnia, sleeping disorders, pseudocyesis. I'm not sure what that is. Sexual dysfunction, asthma, respiratory ailments, right? Addiction, that's another one. Chronic headache, chronic backache, These are things that physical symptoms of childhood sexual abuse, and child abuse too, of any type, right, can kind of cause some of those things, especially things like eating disorders and obesity and insomnia and sleep disorders, right? But the other real physical stuff, a lot of that is from childhood sexual abuse. Just horrible, absolutely horrible. And, this is just what people who have experienced childhood sexual abuse might experience. Psychological and behavioral symptoms of childhood sexual abuse. They list here depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms, dissociative states, and repeated self-injury, suicide attempts, lying, stealing, truancy, running away, poor contraceptive practices, compulsive sexual behaviors, and sexual dysfunction, and eating disorders, poor adherence to medical recommendations, and intolerance of or constant search for intimacy. Either one or the other. They either just cannot tolerate it, or they're constantly looking for intimacy. Kind of go, either way, right? Expectation of early death, That's something that, even just regular, abuse of all kinds, doesn't matter what type it is, will cause a lot of those symptoms. But childhood sexual abuse does as well, right? And we were looking at some of that on that article from the Awareness Center, and that was yesterday morning. Self-injury, suicide, lying, and, things like that. But, these are things that we might not experience every single one of those, and I would hope not. But that is just a common list of psychological and behavioral symptoms of childhood sexual abuse. It says after effects of child sexual abuse in adults. Although there is no single syndrome that is universally present in adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, there is an extensive body of research that documents adverse short and long-term effects of such abuse. To appropriately treat and manage survivors of CSA, that's childhood sexual abuse, it is useful to understand that survivors' symptoms or behavioral symptoms resulting from childhood sexual abuse often represent coping strategies employed in response to abnormal traumatic events. And these coping mechanisms are used for protection during the abuse or later to guard against feelings of overwhelming helplessness and terror. Although some of these coping strategies may eventually lead to health problems, if symptoms are evaluated outside their original context, survivors may be misdiagnosed or mislabeled. And it says, in addition to the psychological distress that may increase the effect of survivor symptoms, there is evidence that abuse may result in biophysical changes. For example, one study found that after controlling for history of psychiatric disturbance, adult survivors had lowered thresholds for pain. It also has been suggested that chronic or traumatic stimulation, especially in the pelvic or abdominal region, heightened sensitivity, resulting in persistent pain, such as abdominal and pelvic pain or other bowel symptoms. And it says, although responses to sexual abuse vary, there is remarkable consistency in mental health symptoms, especially depression and anxiety. These mental health symptoms may be found alone or more often in tandem with physical and behavioral symptoms, and more extreme symptoms are associated with abuse onset at an early age, extended or frequent abuse, incest by a parent, or use of force. Responses may be mitigated by such factors as inherent resiliency or supportive responses from individuals who are important to the victim. And they said here, even without therapeutic intervention, some survivors maintain the outward appearance of being unaffected by their abuse. Most, however, experience pervasive and deleterious consequences. It says the primary after effects of childhood sexual abuse have been divided into 7 distinct but overlapping categories. Number 1, emotional reactions. Number 2, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Number 3, self-perceptions. Number 4, physical and biomedical effects. Number 5, sexual effects. Number 6, interpersonal effects. Number 7, social functioning. It says here responses can be very greatly within the 7 categories. I think they mean responses can vary greatly within the 7 categories. Also, survivors, excuse me, may fluctuate between being highly symptomatic and relatively symptom-free, and this variability is completely normal. So, and then they also have some links here and sources from the National Clearinghouse on Child Abuse and Neglect Information, National Institutes of Health, National Library of Medicine, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect. So that's their resources that they use for these articles. And it's it's a very short article. I just wanted to look at it because so many children, who are sexually abused, they carry physical symptoms as well as psychological symptoms into their adulthoods, right? And we have to deal with all this as an adult, right? And it's very, very hard. And I've talked to so many survivors out there who have had so many physical problems due to the abuse as well. And I've heard so many stories, not just heard them, but I mean read so many survivor stories, just to know that it does cause a lot of physical damage as well as psychological and emotional trauma, right? So it's just absolutely horrible. And that's why we have to stop this. We have to, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys. There's other statistics out there. There's, some will say there's 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 7 boys. The statistics are, they do vary just a little bit. But 1 in 10 is too many. 1 in 20 is too many. When do we draw the line? I mean, 1 in 40 is too many. 1 in 50 is too many. Can you imagine 1 in 50 of children being abused? Well, it's much higher than that. It's 1 in 3 and 1 in 6. We have a worldwide epidemic on our hands here, people, and this is a real problem because it's a cycle of abuse. So they will just pass it on. It will just get passed on because people will not get help. They will continue to either they take these learned behaviors with them and they think that it's okay to sexually abuse children. Because quite often people who sexually abuse children were sexually abused themselves. And not every single survivor will go on to abuse their children. That's a fact. They've done lots and lots of studies on that. Some people think that if you were, abused as a child in any way, that you would automatically go on to abuse your children. Well, some people go the opposite way because they know what it's like to be hurt and what it's like to be abused as a child, so they would never hurt their children. So there's, there's no such thing as just saying, oh, it's just this way or it's just that way. There's people out there who have survived horrific child abuse and are terrific and awesome parents. And then there's other people who have survived child abuse and they go on to abuse their children because for some reason they cannot cope and they could not get the help that they needed. And that's the whole issue, right? We have to, I believe, if we're going to, make a real difference in this world, we're going to have to get some help. Because there's over 600 million survivors of child abuse just in the United States alone. Can that's crazy. You may as well just say the whole country. And you see the problems going on down there and up here in Canada as well. There's so many people, and there's so many people who will not report it. There's so many survivors who will not admit it. And there's so many sick people out there who got away with abusing children and were not brought up on charges and were not made to stop what they were doing. So if there's 600 million survivors of childhood abuse of any type, right, that means look at how many abusers there were out there. 1 for each one of those, pretty much. So you think about this whole situation. How many people are getting called up on for abusing their children? Not very many, because nobody wants to report it. And as long as society just wants to just ignore it and pretend it's not happening, well, then, nothing will ever change, right? It'll just continue on. And that's the whole issue. We have to start looking at what's working in communities, start backing up those programs that are actually working and making a difference, that have a proven track record, right? Because I know this is happening. There's, especially down in the States, there's not too much research up here in Canada. Canada is normally about 20 years behind the United States. So we're 20 years behind you guys. And we have a long way to go. People don't even want to talk about abuse up here. It's like, what? You mean we're going to have to discuss something uncomfortable? Oh, forget that. You know what I mean? It's like nobody even wants to admit that it's even happening up here, but you bet it is. And so, down in the States there, at least people are starting to realize that, hey, we need to start making some noise and get something done here. And there's a few groups up here who are talking about it. And Little Warriors is a great website for regarding childhood sexual abuse. It's up here. It's in Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta. That's a great website, and I love it. And it's Little Warriors. HTTP www.littlewarriors, just like it sounds, LittleWarriors, littlewarriors.ca. And that's a great website, especially for parents with children, because it does inform parents how to talk to their children, how to start teaching their children good touch, bad touch, how to tell your children that at a certain age that they have the right to say no if an adult wants to touch them in a certain sexually, right? And it's a great website for parents with small children, because there's resources and links on there, but it goes through all the information, what to look for, how to keep your child safe, and how to talk to your children so that they will be educated and aware of what's going on. Because you don't want to scare your children, and you don't want to put fear into them, and you also don't want to warp them. There's just a proper way to do it, and they've done enough studies on it now to know that it's age appropriate. You have to look at how old your child is before you start telling them these things, and also you don't want to scare them and warp them, because then you'll ruin their life that way, and then you may as well just consider yourself the abuser because you've just twisted your child. What you want to do is get the education yourself, make sure you understand the material, even if you have to go to a parental support group, just to make sure that you're understanding how to do it. And then you can begin to work with your child. And because 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be abused sexually before the age of 18. So if you have 4 children, chances are likely one of your children will experience sexual abuse before the age of 18. So whether it's a family member, whether it's somebody outside the home, a trusted friend of the family, you name it, they're out there, and they're looking to get a hold of children, and they will get a hold of any child who they can. So, if you have 6 children, 2 of them might be abused sexually before the age of 18. So I'm telling you what, this is not a joke. It's not funny. It's not a lie, and you need to get the education and get the information if you're a parent and realize that this is happening. I mean, it's incredible just how much of this is actually going on. So it's really sad and pathetic, actually, is what it is. But if parents don't keep themselves educated and aware of these situations, kids are going to continue to suffer. And, as a parent, you really owe it to your children to get them the help and get them the information that they need. And you need to keep them safe. It's your responsibility. They're your children. They did not pop into the world by themselves. And you, as the parent, owe them that. You do. So, and if you can't do it, then you need to find somebody who can. Because children need all the help they can get, man. This world is a crazy place. It always has been a crazy place. There never was a time, there was always a pretend time where it wasn't a crazy place. This world's been a sick place since the beginning. If you just go back and do a little bit of reading, the problem is people don't want to, they don't feel that it's necessary to pay attention until their child is sexually abused, and then, of course, they're crying the blues. Right? And, my child was, it's like, well, that's just the whole issue. We have to get educated, and that's why I'm doing this show. So I don't have any children, but I'm speaking out for every child out there, because I grew up in an abusive home, and I was molested as a child by a family member. My mother knew about it. I told her about it. She absolutely did nothing to help me, and told me, well, she was very abusive, so I was a little leery about telling her anyway. But I did tell her, and she did nothing, and actually said it was my problem, and I was going to have to deal with it on my own. And basically she said, just wrap yourself up in a blanket. I'm like, oh, well then, okay, we won't push it, because my mother was very physically abusive towards me. And, I thought, well, okay, that's the answer to that. So I got absolutely no help, and the thing is it's just so sad that parents don't stand up for their children and abuse them, right? And so, you got to know that this is going on out there, people, and it is happening, and there's all kinds of sick people out there who do need help and have children. They have children, but they shouldn't, because they don't know how to behave themselves, you know what I mean, as adults. My mother was abused as a child and took it out on everyone else. She was in an abusive marriage and took that out on everybody. So, and my dad, who knows what his problem is, but he is borderline schizophrenic, and I don't know what his family life was like when he was young, because his parents were born in the late 1800s, and they were cousins. So there was some intermarriage there, and they were very kind of warped. They were born in the late 1800s. So that's my grandparents, right? So obviously I never met them because they were gone before I was born, but they were, I think they were kind of sick and twisted, because it just doesn't seem right. Something just doesn't seem right. So my dad is very sick, and these two people got together and had children, and look what happens. You have an abused woman who's been abused and berated and beaten down her whole life by her mother, and then she marries a man who's very psychologically unstable and abusive. And what do you got? You got a mix for a whole lot of problems. And they had 7 living children, and who knows how many didn't make it, but we know for sure there was 2 that didn't make it. So 7 living children were given a whole lifetime of hell as a gift. Here you go, we're going to bring you into the world, and then we are going to destroy you. And that's what they did. And so sadly, people will not acknowledge that. But people don't want to acknowledge that abuse is even happening. And it's unfortunate because when I go to face my maker, I know what the truth is, and I know where the truth lies, and I know who was at fault. So that's the way it goes. I have no problem talking about abuse, and it starts in our own homes. It starts with our own families, right? We have to take a look around what's going on in our own families and watch out for the kids in our own lives. Because I tell you, there's going to be children dying today at the hands of caregivers and parents. And if they don't die, they're going to be abused and live these horrible lives of torture at the hands of these people. And there has to be someone in the picture who could save that child, right? There has to be someone who, whether it's a grandparent or someone in the family who you would think they would notice the signs, right? But see, people don't want to report it because they don't want their sister to go to jail, right? They don't want their sister's husband to go to jail. They don't want their grandma to go to jail, or their mother, or their father, right? So nobody wants to report it. So who suffers and who pays the price? The child does. And that's if they make it. They could be killed or die as a result of the injuries that are inflicted upon them. So, people, we have to start looking around, and we have to know the signs and symptoms. So I encourage everyone, we got about 2 minutes left, you go to some of these websites out here and get the information on the signs and symptoms of all the different kinds of abuse, because there are signs and symptoms for all abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, you name it. The signs are there, and we have to know what to look for, right? Because children are counting on us. They will not be able to protect themselves, and they will not be able to speak out. So many times they're warped and they're threatened at home that if they tell, they'll be killed. I know that, my mom was very famous for that. I used to tell her just to go ahead and kill me. I just didn't care. But, the thing is, this is the type of thing kids have to put up with, and they live in fear. So, and they don't want to lose their families, right? Their family's all they have, even if the family is horrific and completely abusive. It's all they know, right? So they don't obviously want to be removed from the home. They might not tell on purpose, right? So you need to look for the signs and symptoms. And as an adult, in the situation, it's against the law to not report abuse, and but it should mean more than that. It should mean more that we want to save children's lives, right? So go check out our website. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and you can check out our website, http://dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com, and you can get there's a PDF on there. There's a free PDF download, the Child Abuse Handbook, written by Donna Shear and Sandra Potter, and you can get that handbook for free. Just download it and read it on your lunch breaks or something. All the signs and symptoms of child abuse, right? And then you want to look and see how to report it. There is a proper way to report child abuse. If you don't report it properly, the child could end up back in the home and killed and murdered at the hands of their parents and caregivers, right? This happens all the time. So you have to report child abuse properly, and you have to know how to report it. If a child comes to you and says, hey, I'm being abused, what do you do? If you ask the wrong questions and lead the wrong questions, that case will be thrown out of court. That child will be back in the home, and they will be killed and murdered at the hands of their parents. And if they're not killed, they'll live a life of death. And I hope you will check out my book. I have a book out on Lulu, A Life of Death, The Redemption. All proceeds from that book are going to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, as I don't want the money. I want the money to go to Dreamcatchers for Abused Children to stop child abuse, right? So that book is my personal story, A Life of Death, The Redemption, at lulu.com. And I hope you will pick up a copy. It's my story, and I appreciate the fact that I have so much support out there. Thank you, everyone who's got the book and read it. So yeah, have a great day, everybody. Take care of yourselves. I'll be back on tonight with child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And take care. Have a great day. Bye bye.